Another shocking revelation has been made. Danielle Colby, their longtime companion and colleague, broke her silence in court. Her powerful and explosive testimony left Mike Wolf unable to hide his embarrassment and clear emotional reaction. So, did Mike Wolf really harm his closest friend? And what is the truth behind Frank Fritz's mysterious death? All will be revealed in this video. Get ready. Frank Fritz went through a tragic end that few could have predicted. What do you think about what happened to him? If you have any thoughts or opinions, don't hesitate to leave a comment below the video. Leave a 1 if you believe Danielle Colby's revelations are true, or a 0 if you disagree. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support us in bringing more exciting stories. What you're about to learn may be unbelievable. One of the most important revelations is Danielle Colby's decision to speak out against Mike Wolf. After months of silence and avoiding public appearances, Danielle, the famed antique queen from American Pickers, shocked the public when she announced that she would testify in the trial of Mike Wolf, who is suspected of being involved in the death of Frank Fritz. In an emotional Instagram post, Danielle shared, "I've been silent for too long. In the past, I tried to protect the show and preserve the image that fans once loved, but now I feel the need to speak out. I will testify to protect Frank." A close source revealed that in the upcoming trial in Iowa, Danielle will play a crucial role as a key witness for the prosecution. Reports suggest that Danielle holds crucial details about the fallout between Mike and Frank, their backstage conflicts, and especially the night of the incident when Frank was found unconscious in what is suspected to be a poisoning case. Danielle also asserted that Frank's death was not just a health accident. "I saw the change in Mike's eyes. I heard the threats. I know Frank was terrified, but no one believed him," she shared in an exclusive interview with a local news station. Danielle continued to reveal that she had been pressured into silence. Contractual obligations, threatening calls from the History Channel, and even threats from Mike Wolf's team had made her hesitate for nearly a year. According to some investigative reports, just before his death, Frank Fritz called Danielle and left a chilling message. "If anything happens to me, look at Mike." This statement is now considered a warning sign, a clue that sparked the criminal investigation, threatening to bring down the entire American Picker empire. When the news broke that Danielle Colby would testify, fans were left stunned. A person who had worked alongside Mike and Frank for over a decade was now willing to stand up against her former friend. However, many have voiced support for Danielle's decision, emphasizing that the truth must come to light. Frank deserves justice, and his honor needs to be restored. The trial of Mike Wolf, who is suspected to be involved in the death of Frank Fritz, is quickly becoming one of the most shocking events in the history of American reality television. Danielle's testimony, the only surviving person who worked closely with both Mike and Frank, could be the final blow to shatter all facades. "I'm not afraid anymore. They can erase the show, but they can't erase my conscience," Danielle declared. Her words not only mark the beginning of a legal battle, but also serve as a warning to the entire reality TV industry, which is rotting from within. When Frank Fritz passed away in October 2024, the media rushed to close the case with a simple conclusion: stroke. However, those who were close to Frank knew that the truth was far more complex. It wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. After his first stroke in 2022, Frank had made a good recovery. He was committed to physical therapy, maintained a healthy diet, and placed special emphasis on his health following his back surgery. In fact, Frank proudly told Danielle during a video call that he could walk around the neighborhood declaring, "Now I'll live longer than Mike Wolf. You'll see." But less than 6 weeks later, Frank suddenly passed away, right after he had vowed to expose the truth behind American pickers. A month after Frank's death, the autopsy report sent shockwaves through the public. Contrary to what the media had reported, the autopsy did not indicate any signs of blocked blood vessels or brain hemorrhage at the time of death. Frank's brain showed no acute damage related to a stroke, and there was no clear evidence suggesting a stroke had occurred within 48 hours of his passing. The autopsy report stated, "What shocked everyone the most was the discovery of a small amount of thallium sulfate in Frank's blood sample. Thallium sulfate, a substance often used in vasodilators or recreational drugs, can lead to cardiac arrest when combined with certain other substances. Tests on Frank's liver and kidneys revealed acute damage, not caused by alcohol or Crohn's disease, but from exposure to a poison within a few hours before his death, specifically between 2 to 6 hours. The widespread inflammation and the presence of an unusual enzyme in Frank's bile fluid led toxicology experts to confirm that the victim had been exposed to one or more unfamiliar chemical agents through ingestion or inhalation. The police found no signs of falls or external injuries on Frank's body. He was found lying on his side in bed with his hand near the phone, but there were no strange medications in the room and no handwritten notes or signs of suicide. After the autopsy report concluded that Frank Fritz had been poisoned, no one expected the investigation to take such a shocking turn. The central complication that made the entire case even more baffling was the crime scene, the house of Frank. There were no signs of forced entry or break-ins. The door was locked from the inside, and there was no evidence of a struggle or items being searched through. Everything in the house appeared to be maintained in such a perfect state that it became suspicious. This raises the question of whether the killer had easy access to the house, or worse, could it have been someone Frank knew or trusted? This immediately rules out the possibility of a random robbery or an attack from an outsider. Things became even more strange when investigators discovered that several important personal items of Frank's had gone missing, particularly his black notebook. The notebook, where Frank had documented his plans to expose the show and sensitive details about his complicated relationship with Mike Wolf, was no longer in its usual spot in the drawer. However, on Frank's personal laptop, the police discovered several valuable audio recordings. In one of the recordings, Frank says, "Mike took all my money. On every trip, I only got less than half of what he claimed on TV." Frank went on to recount hours-long arguments during filming days when Mike forced him to appear despite his poor health. He said, "I created this show. You're just taking advantage of me," Frank recalled. Worse still, Frank revealed that Mike had manipulated the entire crew, creating a work environment filled with pressure and fear. The situation became even more complex and dramatic as Frank's final words before his death were revealed. Danielle Colby, Frank's close friend, confirmed that before he passed away, Frank had told her that if anything were to happen to him leading to his death, the cause would certainly be Mike. That statement raised a big question. Was Mike involved in Frank's death? And if so, how was he able to leave no signs of forced entry or struggle while important documents went missing? Could there be a larger force at play behind the scenes, carefully staging the crime scene to conceal evidence and mislead the investigation? From that moment on, the FBI officially stepped in and began their search. Mike's house revealed developments that no one could have predicted. This investigation took a new direction, shedding light on unanswered mysteries. And the 3 years of friendship between Danielle, Mike, and Frank friendship that had lasted for 25 years had been the solid foundation for the growth of American Pickers. Their friendship wasn't just the glue that held the show together, but the true heart of the program. The relationship between Danielle, Mike, and Frank isn't just something cooked up for filming. It's genuinely deep and meaningful. It all started with casual conversations in Iowa, where a shared passion for antiques and absolute trust in each other built a rock-solid friendship. Danielle and Mike have known each other since the early 2000s, when she was still a stripper and had founded the burlesque Leech Group in Davenport. Back then, Mike was already a seasoned antique collector, scouring flea markets and dusty old barns for forgotten treasures. They didn't meet in an office or at some trade show, but in gritty, dust-covered places where people bonded over a shared love for vintage charm. From there, a unique friendship began to blossom. When the History Channel decided to produce American Pickers, Mike didn't hesitate to choose who would manage the antique archaeology shop. Danielle Colby was his pick. She wasn't playing a role just herself, with punk-inspired tattoos and a sharp personality, someone who'd seen the world and had a deep appreciation for old-school values. She wasn't just a sidekick to Mike and Frank. She was truly the glue that kept everything in American Pickers running smoothly. Frank Fritz was also an essential part of this legendary trio. Whenever the three appeared together, their natural chemistry instantly captivated audiences. One of the clearest examples of their tight-knit friendship came in the Laurel and Hardy of Picking episode. In that episode, as Mike and Frank hunted for antiques in rural Ohio, Danielle kept calling not just to pass along tips and leads, but also to crack jokes, keeping the mood light and fun. Mike and Frank often called Danielle Radar for her uncanny ability to pinpoint valuable items from hundreds of miles away. In the Ladies Know Best episode, Mike revealed that many of the rare finds they scored came from leads Danielle provided. "Danielle is an irreplaceable part of our system," Mike said on air. "She's the one who keeps the wheels turning." Their relationship went beyond just work. Danielle wasn't just the one answering phones. She was the one keeping Mike and Frank grounded. She managed appointments, handled logistics, researched markets thoroughly, and sometimes even jumped into negotiations herself. In the early days of American Pickers, things were much simpler. Mike and Frank would drive around in their white vans, rummaging through barns, backyards, and even abandoned airplane hangars in search of valuable treasures. Meanwhile, Danielle stayed behind to manage the shop, listening to tales from their adventures and preparing to display the items they brought back. Sometimes a rusty bicycle, sometimes a vintage neon sign. She handled everything from pricing to presentation. Over time, people started visiting the shop not just to see antiques, but to meet Danielle, ask about Mike and Frank, and hear behind-the-scenes stories that never made it to air. However, nothing stays perfect forever. As the show grew more popular, so did the challenges. Danielle knew her two friends well. Mike was always charging forward, full of fresh ideas, while Frank preferred to work slowly, meticulously, and with attention to detail. Danielle found herself in the middle, acting as a bridge between them. She discussed plans with Mike and kept an eye on Frank whenever he seemed worn out. They trusted her, and she trusted them completely. They were a warm, tight-knit family. But even in these moments, Danielle started to notice something was off. Frank grew quieter, while Mike became more impatient. It wasn't anything too serious, but enough to make her worry. These tensions played out amid network scrutiny, and behind the scenes of American Pickers, the truth was far more complex than the cheerful smiles and antique deals shown on screen. The tight bond between Mike Wolf, Frank Fritz, and Danielle Colby was once the rock-solid foundation of the show's success. But over time, cracks began to form not from betrayal, but from what anyone building something great inevitably faces: pressure, ambition, and the unavoidable winds of change. One afternoon, as the two sat behind the inlayer shop watching cars pass by, Frank confided in Danielle, "Things aren't the same anymore." And Danielle understood that better than anyone. In the beginning, they roamed across America, digging through dusty barns and old vans. Every find was a thrilling surprise, no scripted moments, no massive production crews, no rigid broadcast schedules. It was truly an adventure. But as Frank put it now, it was just an endless filming schedule. Mike Wolf, with his big vision and clear ambition, started wanting more from the show. It wasn't just about hunting antiques anymore. It had to be a blockbuster product. Every episode needed a find striking enough to keep viewers hooked. He wanted each one to have a hook, something truly jaw-dropping. Danielle vividly remembered a meeting in Nashville where Mike said, "We need something game-changing, a rare vintage car or an item no one's ever seen before, anything that can make headlines." Frank looked at him, sighed wearily, and said, "I'm not picking just to serve your show." Mike gradually took full control, and that shift felt daunting. He managed every aspect of the show, from filming schedules and locations to the words displayed on screen. Everything had to go through him. What viewers thought was spontaneous and authentic was actually meticulously planned. Mike demanded each episode feature a killer item, a find shocking enough to make waves. He was no longer interested in small-time trinkets. Now, he wanted big explosions, deals worth tens of thousands of dollars that could spark social media buzz and keep viewers glued to their screens. Frank started feeling sidelined. "I don't even get to pick where I want to go anymore," he once complained to Danielle. "I just show up at prearranged spots and pretend to be surprised." Whenever Frank suggested a location or a familiar seller, Mike would brush it off. Doesn't fit the format, or worse, not exciting enough. From an equal partner, Frank had become a side character in the journey he helped create. Even the editing process lost its authenticity. Danielle noticed that everyday moments like Frank cracking up over finding a quirky cheap item or bantering with a stubborn seller were cut out. Instead, the show only kept what met Mike's standard for airworthy content: dramatic, polished, and full of impact. Mike had once declared, "We're telling a story, and I'm the storyteller." While that statement made sense in the context of the show, it was seen as a claim to his exclusive control. Meanwhile, Frank Fritz was quietly battling a brutal illness. Crohn's disease had tormented him for years, leaving his body increasingly frail, exhausted, and at times completely drained. Around 2017, Danielle started noticing stark changes in Frank. His phone calls became less frequent, and when he did call, his voice sounded feeble, as if every word required immense effort. She'd ask, "You okay?" And Frank's familiar reply was always, "Yeah, just a bit tired." Then he'd quickly shift the topic to some cool item he'd just picked up or a quirky collector he'd met. Frank was never one to complain, but Danielle could see the clear decline in his health. Yet the production crew insisted everything stay on schedule. Mike Wolf had no intention of slowing down. To him, the show had to go on, new episodes needed filming, and deals had to close on time. Mike seemed oblivious to the fact that his best friend was falling behind. During filming, Frank was often absent without notice. Even when present, he was quiet, low energy, just sitting in the van, struggling through each scene. Mike rarely checked on Frank, instead pushing, "We need more footage. We need Frank haggling over that item. Or worse, if Frank's not here, I'll film it myself." The tension between the show's authenticity and its entertainment demands became glaring. Frank, who lived a simple life with a deep passion for antiques, felt sidelined, while Mike took center stage, narrating and showcasing items like a true TV star. Frank gradually became a sidekick, and each episode now revolved around Mike, his ideas, his deals, his camera angles. "He doesn't need me anymore," Frank confided to Danielle. "All he needs is a good camera and a few lines." Danielle, caught in the middle, stayed close with both, but she couldn't deny the show's stark changes. The budget for each episode had ballooned to over $250,000, a massive sum compared to earlier seasons. But with that kind of money came intense pressure. Mike handled all negotiations with the History Channel, managed the numbers, and increasingly became the show's frontman. Meanwhile, Frank couldn't care less about the show's ratings. The pressure on Mike Wolf is mounting as his budget continues to grow. What do you think about this situation? Do you believe Mike can keep his career intact under this pressure? Leave a 1 if you think he'll overcome it, or a 0 if you think otherwise. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay updated with more exciting stories and the latest developments about Mike Wolf. He just wanted to go out and find real treasures. However, by 2019, things became clearer as Frank's health declined, and he began missing many shoots. This left the crew struggling to fill the gaps. Mike continued to push the show forward, but Danielle could feel the emptiness. Then, in March 2020, Frank officially left American Pickers. There was no press release, no farewell episode, just a quiet absence that gradually replaced him. After Frank Fritz left without an official goodbye, Mike Wolf carried on with his work, still traveling, still filming, and still hunting for America's treasures as if nothing had changed. This left many loyal fans feeling cold. Mike's companion of over 20 years suddenly disappeared, yet the show never skipped a beat. Mike didn't post long tributes or reminisce about old memories. When asked about Frank in an interview, Mike simply replied, "Frank needs time for himself. We wish him all the best." And that was it. No further details, no behind-the-scenes explanations. Danielle could see how much this hurt Frank. Sometime after leaving the show, Frank told his son something she still remembers. "My back hurts, and Mike hasn't even called me once." 2 years passed, and his best friend still hadn't made a single phone call. This wasn't just physical distance, it was abandonment. The prolonged silence and brutal coldness from Frank's closest friend, Mike Wolf, made Frank feel betrayed. Mike didn't call, didn't text, didn't check in. No words of encouragement. Despite Frank just undergoing serious back surgery and struggling with Crohn's disease in isolation, he still felt abandoned. In a rare phone call with Danielle, Frank said with a tone of deep disappointment, "He's like a cold machine. Can you believe it? 20 years of friendship and I didn't hear a single word after I hit rock bottom." Danielle was silent, unsure of what to say. She had never seen Frank so bitter. A few weeks later, Frank called again. This time, his voice was not only hurt, but filled with anger. "I'm going to speak out. I'm going to tell everything. People need to know who Mike Wolf really is. We're no longer friends. He only cares about the cameras, the sponsorship money, and his image. He left me behind like an outdated object." Danielle sighed. She knew Frank was in pain, but she also understood that the world of television wasn't easy to change. "Frank, are you sure?" she asked. "I'm absolutely sure," he replied. "I've been silent long enough." From that moment on, Frank began gathering documents, personal journals, old messages, emails, anything that could prove Mike Wolf had manipulated the program, pushed him out, and taken everything far beyond its original authenticity. However, none of his plans ever came to fruition. One cold October morning, Frank Fritz was found unconscious in his home. He never woke up. The press called it a stroke, a familiar term, neat enough to avoid uncomfortable questions. But those close to him knew Frank had changed significantly in the final weeks of his life. He was afraid, tense, and kept repeating, "I'm being watched." After the coroner confirmed that Frank Fritz had died from poisoning, and with the scene at his home shrouded in mystery, no signs of forced entry, and the unexplained disappearance of crucial documents, the investigation hit a dead end. However, Danielle Colby's testimony about Frank's final words, along with the revelations found in his journal, marked a tense and pivotal turning point in the case. It all began with a small detail that few paid attention to: a scrap of paper found beneath Frank's bed in Davenport, Iowa. On it, Frank wrote about the physical pain caused by his battle with Crohn's disease, but he also revealed another kind of torment: the feeling of betrayal. Some of the words in that journal sent chills down the investigators' spines. "I don't know if it's the disease or something Mike gave me. Every time I see him, I feel weaker. From that moment on, everything started to change." On December 8, 2024, an armed federal investigation team suddenly raided Mike Wolf's lavish home in Leipers Fork, Tennessee. The media was completely blacked out, and neighbors saw only faint lights and unmarked FBI vehicles surrounding the property. But no confession was found, only something worse evidence. The FBI's search of Mike Wolf's home marked a pivotal turning point. With meticulous care and precision, agents combed through every inch of the property, from innocuous drawers to unlikely hiding spots. In Mike's private bathroom, agents discovered a locked medicine cabinet containing over a dozen vials of chemicals. Among them was a particularly rare compound, thallium sulfate, a substance once banned for its ability to poison slowly and remain nearly undetectable in standard toxicology screenings. Investigators suspected that it was this very compound that had gradually weakened Frank in the final months of his life. The findings of the investigation matched an internal report from the hospital where Frank died, a report that had previously been suppressed. It revealed traces of a similar toxin in Frank's bloodstream. Investigators began to suspect that Mike had administered the poison during a secret meeting with Frank at a restaurant in Iowa shortly before Frank was declared dead. A restaurant staff member confirmed to the FBI that they had seen Mike pour something from a small vial into Frank's coffee when he wasn't looking. As the FBI continued to dig into the financial records of Wolf Productions, they uncovered a strange transaction. On September 26th, $65,000 was transferred to a small industrial chemical supplier in Chicago. This expenditure was not part of the production budget and lacked any valid invoices. The transaction was registered under the name M. Wolf, and the IP address linked to it traced back to Mike's personal iPad, which was frequently connected at his home in Tennessee. The company receiving the payment confirmed that their order included thallium sulfate, a colorless, odorless toxin often used in Cold War assassinations. The FBI was now certain that this was the poison that had gradually weakened Frank over the months leading up to his death, as its symptoms closely mimicked the Crohn's disease Frank had been battling. The surprises didn't stop there. Another major shock came from Mike's safe, where FBI agents found a series of property transfer agreements granting full ownership of the American Pickers brand. The website domain and shares in the antique archaeology business were all registered under Mike's name. However, what was chilling was that these documents bore Frank's signature, dated just 10 days after he fell into a coma. Handwriting analysis revealed sophisticated forgery with digital software being used. A witness, the former accountant for antique archaeology, testified to the FBI that Mike pressured her to complete the paperwork shortly after Frank's funeral. Despite numerous questions surrounding the legitimacy of the signature, these hasty actions were seen by investigators as Mike's attempt to solidify financial control and erase any trace of Frank's involvement. Evidence of Mike's motive became clearer as the FBI delved into the financial transactions. After Frank left American Pickers in 2021, he requested a larger share of the profits from the show and the store, alleging that Mike was not transparent about the revenue. Emails recovered from Mike's computer revealed his concern that Frank's demands could lead to a costly lawsuit and potentially dismantle the branding empire he had built. An email sent to Mike's lawyer, though deleted, was recovered by the FBI. It stated, "We need to handle Frank's issue before it gets out of hand." The FBI investigation was ongoing as of April 2025, with Mike Wolf being summoned for questioning and facing serious allegations of homicide and financial fraud. However, Mike's legal team vehemently denied all accusations, claiming the documents and the poison were fabricated and merely evidence planted to incriminate him. Whether Mike was truly behind Frank's death or if he was the victim of a conspiracy, only time will tell. With the discovery of the notebook detailing motive, the apparent evidence found at Mike's home, and particularly the hurried actions to seize financial benefits after Frank's death, Mike Wolf, once a complicated colleague, had become the prime suspect. He would have to stand trial to face the accusations. And here, his friend Danielle Colby stepped forward to lay everything bare. In February 2025, the trial of Mike Wolf, the former prominent face of American Pickers, captivated the entire United States. In the packed courtroom, the focus shifted from vintage finds to the grave indictment involving betrayal for greed and the sudden death of Frank Fritz. The prosecution swiftly presented a series of shocking pieces of evidence. First, they produced the recovered copies of the deleted emails retrieved by the FBI, in which Mike wrote to his legal aide, "If Frank isn't coming back, the least I need to do is make sure I keep everything." Next, they revealed a chilling text message sent on October 4th, 3 days before Frank's death. "He's fading now. If something happens, we need to move fast." The prosecution argued that Mike was not only aware of Frank's declining health, but was also making plans to capitalize on his friend's demise should things get out of hand. In the trial televised live across the nation, Mike Wolf's lawyer, Raymond Heller, a renowned figure hailing from Chicago, calmly approached the podium. Amidst the public frenzy surrounding the charges of first-degree murder and theft of property following Frank Fritz's death, Heller opted for a familiar yet high-stakes strategy, casting reasonable doubt on every piece of evidence presented by the prosecution. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Heller began his opening statement, his voice steady and measured, "we are not here to try a man for misinterpreted messages or a fractured friendship. We are here to determine legal truth. And that truth is, there is no physical evidence linking Mike Wolf to the death of Frank Fritz." Despite the prosecution's presentation of a $65,000 financial transaction with a chemical supply company in Chicago, Heller countered that this expenditure was related to a shipment for an upcoming episode focusing on antique metal preservation, bearing no connection whatsoever to any alleged murder plot or financial malfeasance. "No one," he asserted, his gaze sweeping across the jury, "found any trace of a poison related to that invoice in Mr. Fritz's system. This isn't a television show. This is real life, and real life demands factual evidence." When a diary containing negative remarks about Frank was discovered in Mike's residence, Heller stated plainly. No one denies they had disagreements. However, discord is not a motive for murder, and if we start convicting people for their private journal entries, none of us would be safe. Mike's defense attorney further argued that Frank's Crohn's disease was the reason for his declining health, asserting that the stroke was an unforeseen tragedy. They portrayed Mike as a grieving brother mourning the loss of his closest friend, not a murderer. However, the most poignant moment of the trial didn't arise from digital evidence or fiery legal debates, but from the testimony of a special witness, the heart and soul of the American Pickers team, Danielle Colby. As she approached the stand, a hush fell over the entire courtroom. Gone was the image of the sharp vintage performer or the dynamic manager of antique archaeology, replaced by a woman radiating profound sorrow. Danielle wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, but her once vibrant eyes now held a heavy sadness. She gripped the microphone, her hand trembling slightly. Taking a deep breath, Danielle spoke in a voice thick with emotion. 3 days before Frank passed, he called me around midnight. I remember it clearly because I was still tidying up the shop. His voice was tired, weak, but still clear and coherent. He said, "If anything happens to me, watch Mike." A palpable ripple went through the courtroom. A few hushed whispers rose from the back. Then, silence descended once more. Danielle paused, looking down before lifting her gaze. Tears began to well in her eyes. I asked him, "What do you mean? Why would you say that?" He just said, "He's hiding something, and he's afraid I'll reveal it." Frank was never one for paranoia, but this time, he was genuinely scared. Danielle choked back a sob, then continued, her voice trembling. "The day Frank died, I got a text from Mike. Just a few words. Going to see Frank tonight." I didn't think much of it then, but after I found out Frank was gone, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I'm afraid I've been quiet for too long. She looked directly at the jury, wiping away tears, and stated, "I'm here because I owe it to Frank. He called me when he was most afraid. If I don't speak up, who will?" A hush fell over the courtroom following Danielle Colby's testimony. Everyone expected Mike Wolf to maintain the composed demeanor he had exhibited since the trial's commencement. But then, abruptly, he rose. Mike Wolf, the once familiar and affable face of American Pickers, suddenly stood up from his seat in the middle of the courtroom. His face was flushed, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. "No!" he shouted, his voice cracking with anger. The entire courtroom gasped in surprise. "She doesn't know anything!" Mike pointed a trembling finger at Danielle, who stood frozen on the witness stand. "She just sat in the office. She has no idea what I had to do to build this show." Every episode, every trip, every rusty piece of junk I had to hunt down in the scorching heat. This was my empire. Court security swiftly moved in, attempting to calm him. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. But Mike was undeterred. The rage he had seemingly kept bottled up had finally erupted. Frank left. He chose to leave. I kept the show going because I didn't have a choice. Mike panted, each word strained, his eyes blazing with a raw intensity that was far removed from the amiable Picker the public knew. "I didn't kill him. I didn't need to kill him to do what I've always done." Danielle stood there in silence, her lips pressed tightly together. She didn't need to say a word. The jury exchanged surprised glances. Mike's outburst did nothing to help his case. On the contrary, it highlighted the arrogance, pride, and ego that had deeply rooted in the mind of someone who was once Frank Fritz's close friend. The judge ordered Mike's attorney to tell him to sit down. The courtroom fell silent once again, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was heavier, darker, as if a mask had been ripped away before the public eye. And in that crazy moment, perhaps Mike Wolf could no longer hide his true self. Right after Danielle, another witness was called Travis Reynolds, a seasoned lighting technician who had been with the show since season 3. Travis was close with both Mike and Frank, often accompanying the crew during shoots. He testified that Frank was a quiet, sometimes reserved person, but always punctual and responsible. Frank never missed a shoot without letting us know. We always had a tight schedule, and he respected that. But that week, he just disappeared. Mike simply said that Frank needed a break. No one asked any questions, but now I'm not so sure, Travis continued, recalling a production meeting where Mike proposed a staged segment to add some drama. But Frank strongly opposed it. "This isn't right. I don't do this for TV. I do it because I really enjoy picking." Mike got angry, slammed his hand on the table, and said, "If he won't play along, we'll cut him out of the script." All the pieces, text messages, emails, shady financial transactions, brand transfer records, and Frank's warnings now came together to form a chilling picture. Fans who once idolized Mike Wolf sat in silence, wondering how much of American Pickers was real and how much of it was just a staged act to cover up a dangerous conspiracy. The trial of Mike Wolf, once the soul of American Pickers, has not yet reached its final verdict. The official sentence has yet to be delivered. Lawyers are still debating, and evidence continues to be carefully examined as the jury has many long nights ahead to weigh the truth, justice, and guilt. But one thing is clear. Whether Mike Wolf is convicted or not, he has already lost everything. His pride, his ambition for control, and his coldness toward his closest friend have revealed the true character behind the television persona. This is no longer the story of a TV show, but a tragic tale of greed, betrayal, and the cost of selling friendship for the sake of fame. Whether Mike Wolf is convicted or not, he has already lost everything. His pride, his ambition for control, and his coldness toward his closest friend have revealed the true character behind the television persona. This is no longer the story of a TV show, but a tragic tale of greed, betrayal, and the cost of selling friendship for the sake of fame.